It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Hello and welcome to the October edition of Learning Now Television. I cannot even believe it's October. I think I am coming up to my second anniversary, Nigel. I can't remember if it was October or November when I started. But
let's call it your second anniversary, Kate. Forget about all this minor distinct. Welcome, congratulations, 2 years. You've done brilliantly. Well done, Kate. Let's celebrate it.
They say time flies when you're having fun, right? And fun it has been. You know, we've been on a bumpy road with obviously COVID. We've been up to 2 programs a month. We're obviously back down to our monthly program. Who knows? Maybe we'll be back in the studio come the new year. But what have we got on for this month?
I think it's a fascinating month. We've got three big items, which are all challenging in their way. The first is Andrew Jacobs, who's got a bee in his bonnet about hybrid learning. And he basically is saying that if you think hybrid learning is just, do we do it face-to-face? Do we do it online? It's much, much more complex. And it's about, he sees it as merging modes of learning. And he's got a great argument, a great case to put. Then Jan Reikin from Cross Knowledge, he's the director of learning for Cross Knowledge, also a professor at the IE Business School in Madrid. He's talking about some research that Cross Knowledge has done about, and they are launching a new learning maturity index across 6 critical indicators. And they think that that's going to be a bit of substantial research, which will be repeated year on year to get some sense of the growth and development of the industry. Again, very interesting stuff. And then Danny Johnson, who is the founder of Red Thread Research based in the US, Danny ex-Burson, so she's an analyst, but she was pontificating about the mixture or the contrast between instruction and practice. And she'd read some research which was showing that if you throw people in and let them practice and fail and give them support and help them, they move towards competence far quicker than giving them a course and then they do something and then they fail that and then they have to do something again. So she's saying, why don't we do more of experimenting with practice?
I feel like we could do an hour-long show on any of those topics, actually. Trends, maturity. I'm aware of the cross-knowledge stuff. I can't wait to hear more about that. Hybrid learning, and definitely the experimentation piece as well. So just remains for us to say, enjoy the show.
Indeed, enjoy the show. Welcome, and today I'm having a fond reunion with Andrew Jacobs. We haven't spoken together for a while, long overdue. And what interested me was a post that he'd written on hybrid learning, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But before then, let me just introduce Andrew. Andrew is a long and well-known L&D practitioner. He's run learning and development in local government and central government, and he set up his own consultancy in the last couple of years called Clan. Badly pronounced Welsh, but nevertheless, I think you understand what I'm getting at. He's also the author of a regular blog called Lost and Desperate. As well as that, he has a podcast called Women Talking About Learning. And all of the details are on the screen, and you can go find more about Andrew from those links. So Andrew, welcome first of all to Learning Now Television. And let's just talk about hybrid learning. I think there's a huge amount of confusion about the term. So I was really delighted when I saw that you were writing about it in a very definitive and kind of passionate way. So what is it for you? Tell me about it, and let's carry out a little discussion around the term.
First of all, thank you, Nigel, and it's lovely to catch up with you again. So thank you for having me. I have a problem with hybrid insofar as I don't think we understand what it means. I look at hybrid generally in terms of working as much as hybrid learning, and we still can't definitively explain what that is. For the most part, hybrid appears to be location-based. Some people working in the office, some people working away from an office. But actually, it's much more than that. It's to do with the times that we work at. It's also to do with the kind of jobs that we're doing as well. And if we follow through from, as Harold Jarkey talks about, and the learning is the work, well, hybrid learning has to be much more than that. What I'm seeing hybrid is being used and labelled is some people in a classroom, some people online. And I think fundamentally, it's much bigger than that.
And more profound, I think, more not just a kind of technical convenience because not everyone can get to a place. We're talking about a rather big shift in the nature of learning, possibly from this point onwards. So hybrid is not going to be something that will go away when everyone can get into a place or everyone can be online. It's actually a philosophy and approach to learning, isn't it? So explain that a little bit more to me. What do you understand by that?
So I think we've been doing lots of hybrid learning stuff in the past. I had a really interesting chat with Serena Gonzalez-Fish recently, where we talked around some of this stuff. And it feels very much as if it is what we've been doing, but now we have an opportunity to classify it. And some of the things we need to classify are absolutely fundamental. I keep hearing people talk about pedagogy, and what's the pedagogy around hybrid? Well, it's not pedagogy in the first instance. Pedagogical thought is about how we inform and teach children. We're into andragogy and about adults. We're talking about heutagogy and people looking out for themselves. We're talking about geragogy, which is about how older people learn and how older people can help other people learn. I'm into rhizonomy, and how we learn by seeking things out for ourselves. So we've got to break the structures very early on around the idea that learning is central and in terms of control. And hybrid learning, to make the shift towards hybrid and this way of doing things, really it's the combination of the stuff I've been talking about for the last 10 years. But it fundamentally means not having the hierarchical power or authority to say this is learning or this is not learning. And it's much looser kind of definition, and being able to say, actually, do you know what? You can work out for yourself learning and we will support it. But that's a very different way for L&D to be. And like I say, totally. Removing that control, that's where people will start feeling uncomfortable. There's still tons of work that L&D can do, but it's not going to be instructional design.
Yes, I completely agree. What you're also saying, I think, which is really important, is that hybrid learning is not a technical thing. It's not about location at all. It's a fundamental thing about what learning is and how we can optimize learning. But to me, there's something equally important going on as well, Andrew, and I hope you'll agree with this, that learning no longer is about transmission of certainty. It's working around uncertainty. So it's not about I know, you don't, I'll tell you so you know. It's the two of us working around issues and challenges that neither of us necessarily have the full answers to. Now, that is a completely different model of how you engage and work with employees to solve some of the traumatic problems that are going on in organizations at the moment. This is like a door. You go through that door and the door slams behind you and there's no going back. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting the way that you frame that. So for a while, I've been talking about learning is traditionally 3 A's. It's about awareness, it's about acquisition, it's about application. So awareness, people know something, but they need reminding of it. It's about acquisition. It's about new knowledge or new information people need to get, or it's about application, which is about putting it into practice. I think there's a 4th A in there now, which is ambiguity, which is helping people understand ambiguity and embracing it. And I think that's the difference that we're looking for. For years, I've been talking about we need to move from shopkeepers to engineers. And the shopkeeping falls into the first 3 A's. The engineering bit falls into the 4th A, the ambiguity bit, and actually going, well, if you don't know what good looks like, how can I help you understand what good looks like? Like I've said before, we still haven't understood hybrid working. We don't necessarily understand what good is going to look like in terms of the way that we do work. So why should learning go, well, hybrid learning is somebody in a classroom and somebody in online? It's going to be much more than that. And we have to, I hate the word VUCA. It's an awful phrase, but we have to deal with that ambiguity and the nature of the things are not going to be fixed for some time.
It's true. And uncertainty, the bit that sticks for me out of VUCA is uncertainty. We're in uncertain times, and you can't impose certain learning or certain knowledge in a world of uncertainty. It just does not work. It doesn't compute. It doesn't add up. So what you're saying is almost.
I was going to say, interesting. You say doesn't compute, doesn't add up. I think that's the gap, because the gap is about computing and adding up is about the data. And this is where we have a fabulous opportunity to fundamentally look at the data that we're building around hybrid. And it's not about input data. It's not about the bums on seats and all of the stuff that we've been talking about for ages. And that does not compute is because we don't understand how to count the difference that we're making. And so the opportunity is absolutely there to start evaluating differently and actually proving the benefit of how we do stuff.
And back to your metaphor of moving from shopkeepers to engineers, looking at hybrid as, we've got some people together in the classroom and some people online. That's a shopkeeper view of the world. Looking at the kind of complexity and trying to work out, if you like, a learning model for the age. That's what you're saying, a learning model for the age. That's an engineer's role. That's much more complicated and much more manipulated and organized and built, not just saying, do you want one of those, sir, or two of those, madam? So you're spot on, I think. And tell me, what are you going to do about this? This is a really interesting blog. It will excite a lot of interest. Are you pursuing this as an idea? Is this going to be your kind of mission in life? Andrew Jacobs, the hybrid learning guy.
Oh, that would be horrendous, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be awful? God, I'd be horrendous to live with. Like I said, this is the culmination of stuff I've been thinking about for a few years. And I think what it is, it's about informing people and educating the learning community that this is about design choice, that you have an opportunity to, if you want to design blended, you can design blended, but that's a design choice. It falls under the banner of hybrid learning. And actually giving people clarity around what we mean by hybrid, understanding what that means in terms of workplace, understanding what that means in terms of evaluation. Absolutely. I think there is a piece around information. What I'm really excited to do is to go back through the stuff I was talking about 10 years ago and go, is it still relevant now? If it is relevant, why is it still relevant? And are there good things that are built and coded into the way that we work now, that just with a very simple shift, we can take from one model and move into another. And that's the interesting and exciting stuff that I'm finding at the moment. Looking at things like, for example, social constructivism, the idea that people learn from other people. It's been poo-pooed and it's been challenged. We look at the things that Sagata Mitra did, for example, and the hole in the wall, and we found that it didn't necessarily work. However, I think there's a great opportunity to actually look at it in a little bit more detail now and go, well, if you're doing it with children, their knowledge and their experience will be limited. You do that within a workplace where people have much more diverse knowledge and experience. What might that look like? And under a hybrid learning banner, social constructivism comes to the fore, because it's about, I might just go and choose to go and speak to somebody else about how I do my job rather than go anywhere else. And we can label that and as peer-to-peer learning or whatever. That might be a design choice, but the fundamental thinking about whether it works or not, we have an opportunity to investigate.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, this is really, we're talking about new learning models and new opportunities, not because we think it's a great idea intellectually, but because we need something better, and not just dolloping courses on people's plates and saying, eat your meal, eat your breakfast, eat your course. So Andrew,
I was going to say I was going to say the thing we need to add to that is the fundamental difference is this is not about giving people self-directed learning. This is about giving people self-determined learning, and that's the difference. Fundamental shift. It's that moving from this is the content available to you, and you choose what you do, to saying you choose the content, and when that happens, that's the shift that will fundamentally change the nature of how we do our learning.
You choose the content, you choose the experience, you choose the nature of the discussion and the dialogue, you choose the actions and the outcomes. It's much, much more fundamental. Andrew, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much. And let's keep an eye on hybrid learning and hope that one day it's not going to be a massive confusion, but a sense of direction and a sense of building new learning for a new age. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
I'm really thrilled to be talking this morning to Danny Johnson. Danny is the founder of Red Thread Research, and she's based in Salt Lake City in Utah. So my first question, Danny, is first, welcome. And second, tell us a little bit about Red Thread Research. What are you trying to do, and why did you set up the company?
Thanks, Nigel. I'm really happy to be here. Stacia Gar, my co-founder, and I started Red Thread about 3.5 years ago. We saw a gap in the HR research area and thought we could do it a little bit better than it was being done. We focus on bringing the community in to do the research. So in past iterations, when we were both at Burson, for example, we would spend 8 or 9 months doing some really good research, and then we would drop a report. And that's great, but it's just a report. And what we want to do is actually create a conversation as we do that research. And so we start with a premise, and then we do a full lit review. And all along the way, we're publishing, but we're also including everybody who may have thoughts or ideas about what we're talking about to make sure that the research is as rich and as applicable and as accurate as possible.
What I love about Red Thread Research, and if I can put my own cards on the table, is that you're encouraging conversations. So that it's not just the danger with the analysts is it's all one way. It's we know everything, you know nothing, and we're going to tell you a little bit about what we know, but not too much. And what you're doing is the opposite. You're saying this is everything we know, but I bet you know a hell of a lot more. So let's have a conversation. So you've built a kind of community in Red Thread Research, haven't you? And I really love that, and I think that is a gap in the market. Where do you go to have an intelligent conversation about some of the big themes in learning and development, and to have professional researchers, people who know what they're doing, like yourself and your team, kind of stimulating, animating the conversation without taking over the conversation. That's what I really liked. So congratulations. I hope you flourish. I hope you carry on for at least another 10 years of success.
So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good. Now, what interested me and what I want to talk to you about is a post that you made on LinkedIn about productive failure and some research showing that people learn better by doing and failing than they do by having a course telling them how to do it. And I just want you to talk about that. What prompted that post, and what is the essence of what that is saying that really appealed to you and made you shout out about it?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Failure is at my core, not just because I've done it often and learned from that, but I actually started my career as an engineer. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. And one of the things that you learn in engineering in school and in application in industry is that you keep a lab book. You document your failures and your successes. And so the data that you get from failures is just as important as the data you get from your successes. It's crucial. And in the organizations that we've talked to that sort of embrace failure, and the ones that we've studied that embrace failure tend to do better. They create these opportunities for learning and growth in all of the areas, not just in the classroom. We hear a lot about organizations creating sandboxes or safe places to fail, and that's great. I don't see anything wrong with that, especially if there's safety on the line or high high capital risk. But at the same time, I think failure has to be a part of the way that we teach people in organizations. It has to be part of the culture, and it has to be more accepted than it is today.
I couldn't agree with you more. My work on learning culture, that one of the key elements of learning culture is not increase the quantum of learning. I don't think that's a learning culture. That's a kind of culture of learning. But the real issue is being able to admit that something didn't work, that you need help, that you don't understand. And it's when the community comes together around failure and builds success out of failure, you really start to motor. I completely agree with you. So where do you think this is all going? How do you get that message across? Because it's a very powerful message, but it's not heard in favor of courses.
It's not. I have a couple of examples. One thing is our research. So a couple of years ago, actually right before the pandemic started, we did some research on performance, how people perform in organizations. And what we found was one of the main responsibilities of managers is to help their people learn from their failures. And when we introduced that to a group of leaders and said, hey, listen, people, this is a really important aspect of how you help your people perform better. You help them learn from their failures. We got a couple of really good stories about how that's happening in organizations. So 2 examples. One is a very large tech company that's probably familiar to most of you. They've had failure tours. And so it's not that they just sweep it under the rug or that they have an after action review and learn from it that way. They actually celebrate these failures. They have kind of like an Emmys night or an Oscar night where the biggest failure in the organization gets to put together a presentation and present it to everyone and celebrate that failure, which I thought was a really interesting way to create a culture of failing safely. The other example I like even better, I talked to a CEO and he was sort of new in his role, but what he did is he required 4 intelligent failures from every one of his direct reports. And so not just failures, but intelligent failures. So they had to say, I think this is the way that we should go. This is what's going to, we think this is what's going to happen when we go this way. And they had to fail 4 times. So if you think about what that does to the risk-taking ability or the smart risk-taking ability in the organization and their ability to innovate and try new things, it's really, really an interesting and innovative way to make sure that those things happen.
I quite agree with you. I remember one of the things that astonished me when I first went to Silicon Valley in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, a long time ago now, and I'd sit in a bar and people would boast about the size of their failure and all the things they'd learned. It was a kind of cultural thing. And I came from a world where you never even admitted failure, let alone celebrated it. And I thought something important was going on there. And it's been all these years later, we're still not a lot further down that track. And there are some great examples. So just what advice would you give? How would you move an organization from one that guards its failure, hides its failure, only celebrates success? How do you take the first steps to move to an organization that can learn? It's not just failing and celebrate, it's learning from failure and doing it better next time.
I think a lot of it is L&D's fault. If you look at the history of L&D, the very first responsibility they had, the reason that they got put into place was to eliminate failure. They were trying to teach people how to work faster and better and more efficient and to eliminate any waste or failure in the organization. And we've been following that model for about 100 years now. The difference is when it was implemented, it worked better because there was only one way to do something and we knew the most efficient way to do something. But we've carried that over into every single kind of work we do. And especially, now is the perfect time to rethink this because we've had to rethink a lot of things because of the pandemic. Hybrid work, working from home, all of this stuff that has changed. We're uprooting markets and industries and all kinds of things. And so we are not asking people to complete rote tasks anymore. There's no one way to do things anymore. And so making that switch in L&D's brain and saying, okay, there's not one way to do it anymore. You have to allow the space and you have to create the conditions that are right for learning in organizations rather than creating a course that will teach people one way to do it and stifle their creativity and their ability to innovate and their freedom of existence almost.
It is. It's kind of visceral, isn't it? It's pretty fundamental about our sense of ourselves and our sense of our role at work. And if you're trying to be perfect all the time, you're hiding, you're masking, because no one's perfect all the time.
It's also exhausting.
Yes, it is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting
to try to be perfect all the time.
Yes, Yeah, as a human being, but as well as a worker. You're right. I think that's really fundamental advice, and I hope people are listening to you, because you've got a very important message to share. So, Danny Johnson, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I think we're touching on a pretty fundamental topic about the future of organizations, the future of work, and the future of L&D. So thank you so much for sharing with me today. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Nigel.
Robin is back, the ever reliable Robin Hoyle, always controversial. And this time he's talking about the kinds of requests that he gets as a professional consultant for his time and energy, and the way he responds. Because in his mind, there are many times when what is being asked for has got nothing to do with learning, and he tells people in his forthright way. So it's a really interesting looking at the world from a consultant's perspective, which we rarely get. So well done, Robin. I think this is a very interesting bit of input for this month.
You know, sometimes you get a phone call where the opening words make your heart sink. Well, typically for me, those opening words are things like, hey, I was just wondering if we could, or hi, can we just... And what those phrases usually preface is a request to change a planned learning and development activity, not for reasons to do with the efficiency, the effectiveness, or the nature of the delivery that has been planned, but actually because something else has got in the way. Either somebody's not available or there's been a change in plan. It's rarely about the way in which the course or the intervention has been designed to be delivered. And recently, the can we justs that we've been dealing with have been about, can we run this as a face-to-face program, but actually these three people will be on a video link. Is that okay? And I'm afraid my response to that is no, it isn't okay. Because the idea of combining the two media, of trying to work live with a group within some kind of group session where we're going to be involving in discussions, we're going to be asking people to do some problem-solving activities, we're going to ask people to think differently and work with their colleagues to come up with ways of working differently in the future. It's very, very difficult to capture that on a video stream when other people are unable to interact in the same way or are on their own. So you can do that when everybody is on an individual virtual call, or you can do that when everybody is in the room. But mixing the two modes, it seems to me, is astonishingly difficult. But there's something else underlying that. There is this conception that in actual fact, what we're doing when we're running a training session live is that it's a performance. It's primarily presentationally based, that it doesn't matter if people are in the room or not in the room, that really what's important is that we record somehow what the trainer or facilitator is saying and the slides that they are using. And you know, a number of other people have said this, including I think Nick Shackleton-Jones, who said if your session can be replaced by a video, it probably ought to be. So that's not what I'm doing when I'm working with a group face-to-face and live, and it's not what my colleagues are doing. What they're trying to do is to engage with people in interactive exercises and activities to get to the heart of a challenge which the people in the room are facing now or may face in the near future. What they're not doing is giving them a lecture. But that idea is at odds with demands from the government and others that we return back to the workplace, but we make allowances for people for whom they feel uncomfortable about doing that. And it changes, of course, because we've all got used to the idea that we don't need to travel and stay in hotels and go long distances to attend meetings or training sessions or other activities. So there is these two drivers, the fact of convenience, people have got used to spending their entire day in their tracky bottoms and their slippers on, and then other people are naturally and appropriately fearful of close physical contact with others from outside their immediate circle. So I think it's perfectly reasonable, and our line on that at Huthwaite International is to say, look, we prefer to organise virtual sessions unless there's a good and compelling reason not to. We will accommodate face-to-face sessions where the local regulations allow that, but we want everybody to be in the session. It's not a mix and match. We can't do one or the other. And the government's involvement in that is significant from another perspective as well. We know that during furlough, firms were allowed to train their staff, but their staff weren't allowed to be in work. And as such, the training was separate from work. It was just in case learning, and it was predicated on the idea that you would just give people information, and that's what learning and training is. We notice also that the government is introducing these new T levels, where 75% of those vocational qualifications will be primarily academic and only 25% will be on the job or practical. And rather than putting those alongside and as a complement to the more practically orientated BTECs, they're scrapping the BTECs altogether. So it's clear to me that the thinking in education, thinking within the top hierarchy within the business and skills department, is that learning is pretty much a one-way street where people get told stuff, and that it's similar to or the equivalent of university, where you take lots and lots of notes during lectures, and then at some point in the future you regurgitate that information in an examination. But we know that that doesn't prepare people for the workplace, and we know that it doesn't prepare people to really change their behaviour in their day-to-day activities. That involves some kind of active involvement in learning and changing your behaviour, trying out new skills and gaining feedback, using deliberate practice to get better at doing the things that you need to do in your day-to-day work. That's been ignored, and because it's been ignored at government, it's been ignored within industry, it's been ignored in large organisations, and interestingly it's even being ignored within HR departments who ring us up and say, can we just? I think we need to be strong about this and say, no, we can't just. It's not a one-way street, it's not a lecture, it's not us just running through the slides. That's not a learning intervention. The learning intervention is the whole dynamic interaction between participants and between the participants and their facilitator, and it's about planning action for what's going to change back in the workplace and preparing people with models of practice that they can use. That doesn't come from going through a number of PowerPoint slides, whether remotely or within a group setting.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see, this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
Next up is Rob Clark from Learning News with our regular roundup, from research to new product releases to mergers and the ever-going on acquisitions in the space. Stay tuned for all the latest.
The Learning Technologies Awards are back this autumn, and judging is complete ahead of the gala presentation evening in November. How will the awards reflect the shift towards reskilling? learning in the flow of work, and the use of data. We'll ask Don Taylor what's in store this year. Structural change in the economy, hybrid working, supply chain issues, climate change, culture change are all changing how businesses manage people, talent pipelines, and employee experiences. And the HR systems that help businesses to do this are evolving too. A new report out from Fosway shows how. The use of coaching and mentoring to develop skills in the workplace is on the increase. We'll be hearing why from a coaching expert. The Learning Technologies Awards returns this November for the glittering awards night in London. There are gold, silver and bronze awards in 20 learning technology categories. Winning a Learning Technologies Award is the pinnacle of achievement and highly sought after. The 2021 finalists have been shortlisted from hundreds of entries and judging is underway. What can we expect to see from the very best in learning technology now that the workplace looks very different? How might hybrid working and other priorities for learning and development be reflected in this year's awards?
We're seeing a great trend at the moment, and I don't know if this is reflected in the awards at all. I shall be agog like everyone else to see the responses and the answers. What's happening is a shift towards skills as a currency in the workplace, understanding what people can do, where they are now, where they should be, and how that fits into organizational capability. That won't be across each of the 20 entries, but I am expecting that to figure because it is so strong at the moment. I can't believe it won't feature among the award winners.
And Don, are the judges looking for anything perhaps different this year, or how do you win a gold award? What are the judges looking for?
Show impact. It's possible to do a great job, to create great materials and to do wonderful implementation, but unless you're affecting the outcomes of the business, the organization you work for, that's the differentiator.
A new report shows how HR software vendors are adapting to the consequences of the pandemic. HR functions have new pressures on talent and skills from hybrid working, changes to supply chains and cross-border working, and the increasing challenge to talent and skills posed by digitisation and climate change. Fosway's new Cloud HR report shows how HR software solutions are keeping pace and positions the leading vendors according to their performance and potential, their size, their total cost, and the direction of travel between the segments in the market.
So there's been a lot of changes going on, big shifts in priorities, and particularly as we move to things like hybrid working and hybrid workplaces, I think we're trying to work out what really those priorities are, and that has a massive impact from obviously an HR technology point of view.
The people experience is really one of the critical drivers for the purchase of systems. What's the market looking for here?
Often your experience as an individual, of course, is based a lot more on, when things go wrong, how quickly they get resolved, the internal service model within an organization and how that helps you, your ability to get answers to critical questions, your ability to get what you think are the right outcomes from your manager or from an HR function in resolving issues. So people experience is much, much bigger than the UX of a system or of a suite.
Two reports out in the last month have highlighted a gap between how men and women feel about their careers as a result of the pandemic. A survey of 15,000 university students and recent graduates by the CFA Institute, which represents finance workers, found that while overall graduates feel confident about their future careers and think it will be as good or better than their parents' generations, women are a lot less confident than men. 84% of men feel confident about their career prospects compared to only 53% of women. It also found that twice as many women have had to reassess the sector they would like to go into due to the pandemic, with medicine and science, healthcare and education topping the list of the most stable and attractive. The publishing group Pearson found in a survey of 6,000 women that 3/4 feel bias and discrimination are still holding women back in their careers, ahead of age, gender and racial discrimination. It found that 90% are planning to take some form of action to improve their career prospects in the year ahead, and that half are planning to change their jobs, with 1 in 5 planning to start their own business. When planning their careers, students and graduates are seeing increased value in taking additional education, and most believe postgraduate qualifications and professional certification are now more important when looking for a job. This is causing significant uptake in further studies. Around half of graduates are now planning to prolong their time in education. The Chartered Institute of Marketing found that those at the start of their careers are now more likely to invest in training and qualifications than before. It found 3/4 of 16 to 24-year-olds have missed out on work experience and related training opportunities, and that around 1/3 have took additional training to help them in the job market. Coaching and mentoring are making a strong return to learning and development as go-to strategies for building skills. In the past, perhaps coaching was not thought of as a scalable way to build skills in the workplace compared to digital learning, but perhaps this view is changing. Coaching was one of the only areas of learning and development to improve its ranking in this year's L&D Sentiment Survey, as the focus on reskilling pushed other L&D strategies down the list of priorities during the pandemic.
Things like virtual and hybrid and different ways of working has opened up access. My clients are all over the world now. So I think there's something about access and availability, but also the very nature of coaching, where people are making sense of real and important issues and doing that in a safe environment where they can be challenged and supported at the same time. So the need, I think, has gone up, but also the access and availability to coaches all over the world actually has gone up as well. So the combination of those two factors, I think, has brought about, I would suggest, a shift in the volume that's available.
There's more on this and on each of the features in today's bulletin on Learning News. I'm Rob Clark. Thank you very much for joining me today. See you next time.
It's rare, and probably far too rare, that I'm joined by someone speaking to me from the Netherlands. And I'm very, very delighted and thrilled to welcome Jan Rijkin. Jan is the Learning Director of Cross Knowledge. He's also a visiting professor at IE Business School with our good friend Nick Van Dam. So welcome to Learning Now TV, Jan. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks very much, Nigel. It's a pleasure to join you finally, to meet again.
Yes, it's long overdue having you on Learning Now TV, long overdue. Now, tell me a little bit about Cross Knowledge. You're Learning Director at Cross Knowledge. For those who are not sure what Cross Knowledge does or what it is, just give me a few seconds, some headlines about Cross Knowledge.
Yeah, happy to do that. So Cross Knowledge is a digital learning partner for corporate learning organizations with about 400 plus clients. We've been in the digital learning industry for more than 20 years, which is rare. We were one of the early adopters. We're part of the Wiley family. So Wiley is a US multinational focusing on education and research, aiming to provide support to people in every phase of their career. Cross Knowledge provides end-to-end solutions, so both on technology and digital learning products and services side. Won a lot of Brandon Hall awards. Got a lot of client recognition. I think that's more important for us, and client loyalty. And I think what I'm most proud of is that we also invest in research. So recent examples of that are, let's say, our research on learning climate or online learning behavior.
Good, and we're going to talk about a bit of research now, aren't we? That you've done some research and you're going to be releasing reports soon on digital learning maturity. Just tell me, what is digital learning maturity? What is it all about, and why is it important?
Yeah, that is a question I get asked often. So the world around us is changing, and I think what we see is that due to these rapid changes and accelerated by the pandemic, is that more than 80% of the organizations have skills gaps and talent shortages, which means they have to invest in upskilling and reskilling. And again, COVID has accelerated the investments in digital learning. So digital learning maturity is an approach for organizations to understand and progress their skills acquisition and align their priorities with the business priorities. The approach and the model is let's say, based on work by Josh Berzin and Towards Maturity and some client insights. It actually goes, let's say, one step deeper. We don't only look at maturity levels, but we look at 6 dimensions. So what are the dimensions that organizations need to address to progress their learning?
Yeah. Give me an example of a couple of the dimensions.
Yeah, happy to do that. So you've got the learning analytics, you've got the learning architecture, you've got learning experience, which is all about the way we design learning and offer. We've got, let's say, L&D capabilities, which is about L&D strategy and governance. And we've got the dimensions of the learner and the line manager, which yes, are important to make learning work. Yeah. I think what people also ask is, why now? Why this approach now? And I think it matters now because this approach provides organizations with the opportunity to make their learning investments effective and efficient, and let's say get levers to progress their learning. So things like time to performance, and as you know, learning is a more important strategic lever than ever to attract, develop, and retain employees. Yeah.
And what are you after? Ideally, should an organization have a balanced scorecard with those 6 parameters? It should be kind of somewhere towards the top of each of them. There's not a hierarchy. They're all equally important.
I think that's an important statement. So they are indeed equally important, because if you address one of them, you can, let's say, advance your maturity, but you're held back then in your impact by others. So that's why we decided to look at these 6 dimensions and provide an overview in the survey that we ran.
Yeah. So let's just go forward. So you did a survey. How many organizations did you survey?
It was 198. So we aimed for 200. We missed 2. We could have faked it, but 198 organizations participated in 3 regions and in 13 industries. So we looked at the industries. We also looked at the size of the organizations, because we thought that would be important.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some really interesting cross-tabbing between size, location, different industries. So can you give me some highlights? What were some of the things that you discovered doing that research? It sounds like a really useful piece of research that I haven't seen anything quite like that before, particularly something stretching across those 6 clear parameters, which every organization has to address. So give me some of the outcomes.
Yeah, if you look at some of the outcomes, though, the average score was 60 on a scale of 100. So that's actually a little bit disappointing in terms of maturity. So a lot of room for improvement. And it actually reinforces the work we've been doing with some clients over the past years. So that was one conclusion. If you look at the dimensions, the learner dimension scored lowest. So it was, let's say, 51 on a scale of 100. Was, let's say, an important thing to discover in itself, because that provides organizations with the opportunity to work on. So if you look at the learner dimension, how do organizations provide access to learning for learners? Are they supported and encouraged in terms of their self-directed learning? Are they, let's say, encouraged to go out and find learning, either, let's say, in terms of knowledge, skills, or peers? Obviously, there's also an element of learner marketing, which in many organizations is not that advanced. What we see is that when organizations develop learning initiatives, they spend, I would say, 95 or even more % of their budget and energy on designing and rolling out the learning solution, and a very limited amount on learner marketing. So then it's not strange that organizations say, why are people not signing up? Why are people not, let's say, understanding what we've got to offer? So that's an important dimension to advance.
It seems to suggest that it's a very important dimension, but most organizations either ignore it or don't do it very well.
Yeah, I think that's that's right, Nigel. So it's underestimated. So organizations focus on designing the learning, which, let's say, traditionally is the core of our business. But we should look far beyond that. So we should look at how can we make sure that learners know what's going on? How do we make sure that learners are supported in their workplace, either by, let's say, on-the-job learning support, or by encouragement by line managers? So I think it relates to one of the shifts that I'm seeing in our industry, which is the shift from content focus to context focus.
Yeah, that's very important. And part of the context is the learners, isn't it? It's the environment, but it's also the learners. It's not just about shoveling content their way. It's about trying to understand what they actually need. What was the highest scoring of the 6? Which one were you pleasantly surprised about, if any of them surprised you?
You can indeed say pleasantly surprised. So the highest score was learning capabilities, which meant focus on learning strategy and learning governance. I didn't expect it to be that high, because when I talk to organizations, when I talk to a new client, the first thing I ask is, show me your learning strategy. And usually what I get to see is a sort of an action plan. But let's say, and obviously people score themselves, but this was the highest scoring dimension. The highest scoring industry was pharma, which is not surprising to me, because let's say they invest a lot, partly because they've got mandatory stuff, and they obviously also invest a lot in R&D and knowledge acquisition. And related to an earlier point that you made, there was a correlation between organizational size and maturity. So the 50,000 plus organizations scored higher than smaller organizations, probably because they've got a quite mature setup in terms of their learning and development function.
That's true. So when is the report going to be published? When can I read it? Because I'd love to get some of those insights and read the detail.
Yeah, the aim is to launch it in the first week of November.
Excellent. So on the screen is a link. If you want to get hold of this report when it's available in a couple of weeks, then please note down the link and click on it. And in the meantime, thank you, Jan. Thanks. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I hope this is a continuing saga for you, that digital maturity is something that you keep abreast of, and that maybe in a year or two's time, we'll have another chat and we'll watch the trajectory. And I think you're right, that if organizations are not addressing all of those 6 dimensions, they're going to be in trouble. So you're running up a warning flag, you're showing the state of play, and you're making an offer for organizations to benchmark themselves and help themselves essentially get better. Hey, all of these things are all good, aren't they? I think that's a great series of opportunities for everyone, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Bye.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
That was a great program. Very interesting this month. So, Kate, what did you find interesting? What grabbed you?
All of it, to be honest, Nigel. I think they're all absolutely key topics. I think the cross-knowledge research is picking up what's been a gap that we've had in the space, and the kind of that ability to benchmark and find out how you stack up against 6 critical indicators, I think is a great, and the timing of it, I think, is really important as well, because here we are 18 months after the start of the pandemic. So much digital stuff's been put into place, but actually what's working, what isn't, is it making a difference, and how does that compare with what your peers and other organizations are doing, and kind of where should you be, what does good look like? I think so many of us are out there trying to do the work. We don't try to sort of what's the word, step back and reflect. And so I think kind of having the opportunity to do that via that research is really, really valuable.
I think so too. I'm really looking forward to the report. I think it comes out in early November. So please follow the link and grab the report when it comes out. It's completely free. And I think that some of the ideas that Andrew was turning around about different modes of learning and our ability to mix and match modes of learning, not just whether it's online or offline, and that focus with Danny Johnson on practice, the power of practice that we seem to have forgotten. I'm a great believer in the power of practice. So that there are 3 really good debates. I think you're right, Kate.
And I think the kind of the Andrew piece and Danny's piece, they both, I think, speak to us about not being too binary. It doesn't have to be an either or, practice or, formal instruction, or, online or in person. Where does that blend? I mean, we've been talking about blended learning forever, most certainly my whole career, but where is that blend? It's still too stop-starty, and it doesn't really, they sit alongside each other, but they don't really blend.
No, I agree with you. They're all about thinking a bit more deeply about what you're doing. And from my point of view, always a good thing.
Yes, well, hopefully that's challenged our viewers. And, we always would love to know what you think. If you've got any responses to anything that we've covered from today, or you'd like to talk about any of the subjects, then, always get in touch with us.
Indeed. And I bet you want to hear about what's coming up shortly, whether there are any conferences and events. And, Kate, there are.
I do. Well, and Devlin's just happened in the US in person, hasn't it? So what else?
It has. Well, the Learning Conference in Orlando has been moved from face-to-face to online because of issues in California and the problem about vaccination certificates and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, there was such a tension around it that they've moved it to online. But the CIPD annual conference and exhibition in Manchester on the 3rd and 4th of November, that's going ahead live, as indeed is Online Educa Berlin on the 1st to 3rd of December. And our own Learning Technologies is back in Excel on the 9th and 10th of February. And the Learning Awards are back in a hotel rather than on Zoom on the 17th of February. So a lot to get to come to terms with, lots of things for you to book up to if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to give a special mention to 2 friends of the show who are conducting some research into virtual and hybrid working as well. I believe that we're going to have the link by the time we've done the edits here, flashing up on screen for you. But Joe Kirk and Jane Daly are doing some really important research in this area, and we'd all really value the Learning Now TV community's input into that. So please take part if you do get time.
Yeah, take part, and we will share the results as well. We'll talk about the results when they're published. So we're back on the 25th of November. So we should really be saying, remember the 25th of November. That's going to be the date to think about. And until then, from all of us at Learning Now Television, stay well, stay safe, and congratulations again, Kate, on your 2nd anniversary on Learning Now TV.
It's been a joy, and I'll see you next time.
You will indeed. Thanks very much.